So I want you to just imagine for a second that you're dangling like 300 feet in the air.
Oh, wow. Yeah, terrifying right off the bat.
Right. You are whipped by these freezing winds, and there is literally nothing holding you up but this crude braided rope.
Just a single rope.
Exactly. A rope anchoring you to the sheer limestone cliff. Your hands are bleeding, your muscles are just absolutely screaming, and you are holding this incredibly heavy iron chisel.
And you're not up there doing anything practical either.
No, that's the crazy part. You aren't building a bridge to connect two cities, you know? You aren't building a fortress to protect your family.
Right.
You are up there spending months, maybe even years, carving this meticulously detailed, massive message for a king, a message that almost no human being will ever even be able to read.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. Welcome to another custom-tailored deep dive. Today, we are exploring this mission of pure, unadulterated psychological hacking.
Ecological hacking in the ancient world. I love it.
Yeah, we are going to look at how one of history's most powerful rulers, Darius the Great of the Achaemenid Empire, basically hacked human geography, right?
Mm-hmm.
He weaponized architecture and engineered human perception to project this absolute, unshakable authority over the ancient world.
And the sheer audacity of what Darius accomplished in the 6th century BCE is, well, it's difficult to overstate, honestly.
Oh, totally.
I mean, we live in an era where authority and influence are projected through, broadcasting, digital feeds, algorithmic targeting.
Right, you can reach billions of people in an instant with a tweet.
Exactly. But Darius had none of those tools. Zero. Yet he managed to create this system of omnipresent structural propaganda that fundamentally altered how human beings related to power.
So to figure out how he actually pulled this off, we are diving into this incredible collection of historical evidence today. We've got antiquarian records and translations of ancient inscriptions.
The source material here is just fascinating.
It really is. We're looking at records from the 19th century, specifically these French and Latin accounts that painstakingly mapped out these ancient Achaemenid monuments.
Yeah, these two massive slide decks in our dossier.
Right. And we're going to trace how Darius projected this colossal power across 3 very different physical scales.
With 3 scales of power.
Exactly. We start with massive, terrifying rock carvings suspended on impassable mountains. Then we move to the ego-crushing architecture of his royal palace. And finally, we look at how that mountain-sized power was literally compressed to fit right into the palm of a hand.
It is a masterclass in what we could call structural reality building.
Structural reality building. I like that.
Yeah, because we are tracing the spatial dimensions of imperial power. We're decoding how a ruler convinces millions of people across vastly different cultures that his authority isn't just political.
Right. It's deeper than politics.
Exactly. He convinces them it's a fundamental law of physics.
Wow. Okay, I want to talk directly to you, the listener, for a second, because you might be driving to work right now or sitting at your desk thinking, like, ancient Persian rock carvings. What does this have to do with me?
Fair question, honestly.
It is. But whether you are managing a global corporate team, or you're trying to build a brand from the ground up, or honestly just trying to understand how modern institutions shape our daily reality, you need to hear this.
Absolutely. The mechanisms are the same.
Yes. The tactics used by Darius over 2 millennia ago to create this aura, this feeling that his authority was just an inescapable fact of nature, those underlying psychological mechanisms are completely 100% relevant today.
Because the medium has evolved, right? We've
Yeah.
gone from granite and wax to silicon and pixels.
Exactly.
But the psychological mechanics of establishing unquestionable legitimacy, those remain identical.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the most extreme, almost absurd example of this propaganda.
The mountain monuments.
Yes. Our historical records begin with a deep dive into what scholars call Achaemenid monumental epigraphy, which I had to look that term up.
It's a bit of a mouthful.
It is, but it basically just means massive ancient messages carved into permanent materials, right?
That is a perfect working definition, yeah. We are looking at inscriptions carved into the living rock of the earth itself.
The living rock.
Yeah. Specifically, the records focus on 2 monumental sites of antiquity, Mount Behistun and Mount Alvand. And the scale of ambition here is almost incomprehensible.
Even when you look at it through the lens of modern engineering, it's nuts. The first visual we have from these 19th century antiquarian journals is this meticulously drawn sketch of the Behistun inscription.
And that drawing really captures the sheer scale.
It really does. The juxtaposition in this drawing is what caught my eye immediately. At the very bottom of the frame, there are these microscopic little figures.
The traveler.
Yeah, human travelers on the road. They look like specks of dust. And looming hundreds of feet above them is this sheer, aggressive, vertical drop of a rock face.
A completely impassable cliff.
Right. And carved into that impassable, overhanging cliff is this colossal monument.
Well, the topographical reality of these sites is fundamental to understanding the message Darius was sending.
How so?
Because the sheer danger required just to access the rock face is staggering. Mount Behistun presents this visual profile of a stratified, towering cliff.
And it overhangs the road below, right?
Exactly, meaning you can't just climb up from the bottom like a normal mountain. The ancient stonemasons had to be lowered from above, or they had to construct these terrifying wooden scaffolding systems anchored directly into the sheer rock.
Working in just brutal conditions. Let's talk about the physical mechanics of that for a second. We aren't talking about casually painting a wall here.
No, not at all.
The Achaemenid Empire had to organize a massive logistical supply chain just to create this art. They had to source iron chisels and bronze tools.
Which, by the way, dull incredibly quickly against limestone.
Exactly. So they had to constantly transport food, water, and replacement tools up a mountain. They had to coordinate teams of highly skilled artisans who were essentially suspended in the sky.
Fighting vertigo all day long.
Vertigo, howling winds, blistering heat, just to chisel tiny, precise, cuneiform wedges into solid stone.
And they weren't just carving text either.
Right, they carved a massive, life-sized relief of Darius trampling his enemies, surrounded by his generals.
So the concentration of wealth, manpower, and absolute obedience required to execute that is just staggering.
It's mind-blowing.
The very existence of the carving proves the extent of the king's power. Before a single word of the decree is read, if it could even be read from the ground, which it couldn't.
Right, because it's hundreds of feet up.
Exactly. The logistics of its creation tell the viewer everything they need to know about who commands the world.
But the location still baffles me when you think about traditional communication.
Since it's so hidden.
Yeah. I mean, we have Mount Behistun, which at least is high above a known trade route, so people walk under it.
Yeah.
But then the records detail Mount Alvand.
Ah, yes. Mount Alvand is entirely different.
It really is. It is hidden deep within a wild, severe granite gorge. The Latin records refer to it as the Fosses Alvandenses.
The jaws of Alvand.
The jaws. It sounds terrifying.
It is. It's a narrow, rocky, desolate mountain pass. Behistun is associated primarily with Darius the Great, while Alvand features decrees from both Darius and his son and successor, Xerxes.
Okay.
But the common denominator across both sites is the absolute extremity and isolation of the placement.
Which brings me to this analogy I just can't shake. Putting these highly detailed, incredibly expensive monuments on impassable rock faces or hidden inside desolate mountain jaws.
Yeah.
It's like a modern company spending $1 billion to rent a billboard on the dark side of the moon.
That is a great way to put it.
Like, why spend immense resources and literally risk the lives of your stonemasons to carve a massive, detailed message where the casual passerby, the merchant, or the taxpayer can't even get close enough to read it?
See, we are deeply conditioned by modern communication theory to believe that the value of a message is inherently tied to its visibility.
Right, like how many impressions did we get? What's the reach?
Exactly. How many eyeballs saw the text? But Darius completely subverts that expectation.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is the psychological concept of placing authority beyond human reach.
Beyond human reach. So the invisibility or the inaccessibility is actually a feature, not a bug.
Absolutely. These monuments were fundamentally not designed for daily human administrative readership.
They weren't meant to be the daily news.
No, they were not placed in the bustling town squares of Babylon or Susa. They were not placed along comfortable shaded promenades where people gathered to debate the news of the day.
Right, where everyone could just stand around and read them.
They were suspended on perilous rock faces and tucked into savage gorges. By making the deliberate choice to place the text out of comfortable reach, Darius instantly signaled that the intended audience was not the casual passerby.
Wow, the danger is the message.
Yes, the topographical extremity is the medium itself. By removing the monument from the human sphere, the Achaemenid rulers signaled that their authority wasn't subject to the daily whims of politics.
Or the literal vandalism of human traffic.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense, because if you put a monument in a city square, someone is eventually going to throw mud at it, or graffiti it, or chisel their own name over it.
It happens all the time in history.
Right. So by putting it 300 feet up a sheer cliff, you make it physically untouchable. You elevate the king's word above human corruption entirely.
It creates an aura of the supernatural, really. When a traveler looks up and sees massive figures and perfect script carved into an impossible location.
It's like magic.
Right. The logical conclusion in the ancient mind is that earthly limitations do not apply to this king.
But wait, it couldn't have been entirely for the birds and the gods?
Why?
Even if the casual merchant wasn't meant to read it, these monuments had to be experienced by someone important, right? Like royal messengers, vassal kings, foreign diplomats. Someone had to be brought there to be intimidated.
Oh, absolutely. It was definitely a destination for a select few.
And the historical accounts actually trace what it physically felt like to make that journey. I want to shift our focus to the specific geographical journey to Mount Alvand because the records we have from the 19th century map this out beautifully.
Yes, they do. The antiquarian records provide a really meticulous breakdown of the historical route taken by the French explorer Eugene Flandin.
When he set out to document the Alvand inscriptions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He documents his ascent in 6 distinct stages. And when you analyze his diary entries and topographical notes, it reads less like a hike and more like a carefully engineered psychological funnel.
Okay, I want you, the listener, to put yourself in the shoes of an ancient visiting dignitary for a second.
You've been summoned to see the king's decree.
Right. Flandin's route begins at stage 1, which he simply calls the city boundary. You leave the safety of civilization behind. You step past the walls, the guards, the familiar sounds of the market.
You're stepping out of the human sphere of influence and entering a liminal space.
Then you hit stage 2, the Valley of Abbasabad. It's this narrow valley located roughly 3 kilometers northwest of the city.
And notice how the space changes there.
Yeah, you are no longer on an open plain where you have freedom of movement. The landscape is literally funneling you. It's guiding your path strictly forward.
But then, interestingly, the landscape offers a false sense of security. Stage 3 is referred to in the records as the cultivated zone.
Yes, and the descriptions here are incredibly sensory. Flandin notes a refreshing ascent alongside an impetuous torrent of water winding through these perfectly cultivated orchards.
He describes the landscape as smiling.
Smiling, right. It smells like fruit blossoms, the air is cool, and it just feels like you are taking a beautiful, relaxing stroll through a royal garden. Your guard drops, you feel completely relaxed.
And that relaxation is critical for the psychological shock that follows, because the cultivated zone abruptly ends.
Instantly, you turn a corner and hit stage 4. The savage transition.
The smiling orchards just vanish.
Completely. The steep rocks violently close in around you. They leave only this narrow, treacherous passage. The water that was a refreshing stream a mile ago is now a furious, deafening torrent crashing against the stones.
The physical environment turns totally hostile and severe. You are thrust into the fauces elvendenses, the jaws.
You have to push your way through this sensory assault, this roaring noise and jagged rock, until you reach stage 5, which is called the granite pyramids.
Right, and you are now 5 kilometers deep into the mountain.
Flandin describes it a massive cascade of water plunging violently from these gigantic, naturally formed granite structures. The noise is overwhelming. You are exhausted, soaked, and entirely cut off from the world.
And it is only there, at the peak of that physical and sensory exhaustion, that you reach stage 6, the southern face.
Tucked away in this desolate, deafening gorge, carved into the southern rock face, you finally find the king's decree. 2 pristine, perfectly preserved, cuneiform tablets.
The sequencing of that journey is profoundly deliberate. This is what we mean by reality building.
It's totally engineered.
Right. The empire didn't just carve a rock. They co-opted the natural geography to architect an approach path. You transition from safety to a false sense of cultivated comfort to sudden violence, deafening noise, and savage isolation.
It physically prepares the mind. It breaks you down. By the time you stand before the rock face, you are exhausted, you're intimidated, and you are acutely aware of how small and fragile you are compared to the terrifying forces of nature.
And then you see the writing.
And then you see the writing. The contrast between the environment and the monument itself is where the true ideological power lies.
Absolutely. We actually have the architectural blueprints and measurements of the Alvand decrees from these texts, and the sheer mathematics of the carving are striking when placed against that chaotic backdrop.
I want to visualize the exact measurements because it really drives this home. This isn't just someone scratching their name onto a boulder with a knife.
No.
The dimensions are massive but mathematically precise. The entire frame is 2.7 meters wide by 1.90 meters high. So we are talking about a billboard roughly 9 feet wide and 6 feet tall.
And it is suspended exactly 10 feet above the ground surface.
Right, so it forces you to look up, it hovers over you.
And the recession depth is a critical piece of engineering, too. The stonemasons didn't just smooth the surface, they carved a recess 20 to 25 centimeters deep into what the antiquarians call the living rock.
So they hollowed out the granite to make a perfect deep picture frame.
They created a room inside the stone, basically.
Exactly. And inside that recessed frame, the layout is divided vertically into 3 distinct sections of unequal width. The left tablet belongs to Darius, the right belongs to Xerxes.
But here is the detail that completely blew my mind.
Oh, the lines.
Yes. Inside these columns, there are exactly 20 horizontal lines of cuneiform characters.
Not 19. Not 21.
Exactly 20 lines, perfectly spaced, running perfectly horizontal.
Imagine the contrast there. You have just survived the jaws of Alvand. Your ears are literally ringing from the chaotic, crashing waterfalls. You are surrounded by jagged, random, untamable granite peaks.
And in the dead center of that chaos, you are confronted with rigid, hyper-organized mathematical perfection.
It is the literal embodiment of order out of chaos.
It is an early, definitive assertion of human imperial order imposed upon the wild.
Wow.
The mountain is violent and unpredictable, right? But the king's word is perfectly measured, perfectly straight, and perfectly enduring.
It communicates that the empire's capability to organize and control extends even into the most savage corners of the earth.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've survived the terrifying geographical journey. We are standing in the gorge, and we've measured the perfect geometry of the frame. But what does the decree actually say?
Right, the text itself.
Yeah, and more importantly, who is the intended audience in a place where literally nobody lives? Because the text itself presents a massive geopolitical puzzle. Let's dig into the iconography and decode the actual words.
The antiquarian records break down the iconography of imperial power on these monuments into 3 visual layers, reading from the top down.
Okay, top down.
And each layer serves a specific ideological function.
So at the very top of the monument, hovering over everything else, is the symbol of Ahura Mazda.
The winged figure.
Right, it's this beautiful winged figure holding a ring. This represents divine oversight. Ahura Mazda was the supreme creator god in the pre-Islamic Zoroastrian adjacent theology of the Achaemenids.
So the very first thing you see is the divine sanctioning the decree from the heavens above.
Beneath that, occupying the vast middle space of the recess, you have the linguistic medium.
Which is the administrative script.
Yeah, those precisely measured cuneiform wedges locked into their rigid 20 horizontal bands. This layer projects ordered human governance and the bureaucratic reality of the empire.
And finally, at the bottom, framing the text, is the architectural authority.
The pillars.
Yes. The carvings utilize the quintessential Achaemenid motif of a pillar, specifically the intricately carved stone capital that you would see in a royal palace.
Oh, that makes sense. It grounds the abstract text in the physical, heavy grandeur of the royal court.
Exactly. Those 3 layers, the divine winged figure, the ordered linguistic script, and the heavy architectural pillar work in tandem to establish what scholars call the 2 pillars of legitimacy.
And when we decode and translate the actual cuneiform wedges, the message matches the visual structure perfectly.
Let's read the translation because it is incredibly bold. Pillar 1 is the divine architect.
The text explicitly identifies Ahura Mazda as the great god who created the earth, the heavens, and mankind.
And then, crucially, it adds that Ahura Mazda is the one who made Darius king.
The strategic sequencing there is vital. Darius establishes the primacy of the divine before he ever mentions his own earthly power. He is explicitly stating that his authority is not a political accident. It is not the result of a bloody military coup, and it is certainly not a complex negotiation with the noble classes.
Which is fascinating historical context, because Darius absolutely did take power in a bloody coup.
He really did. He assassinated the guy on the throne, claiming the guy was an imposter.
Yes, the false Bardia.
Right. And then he had to fight massive civil wars to secure his position. He needed this propaganda desperately because his actual claim to the throne was incredibly shaky.
Precisely. The more insecure the realities of power, the more absolute the projection of that power must be.
That is a great point.
By stating that Ahura Mazda made him king, Darius bypasses all earthly debate.
Yeah.
His rule is framed not as a political victory, but as a cosmic mandate.
So to rebel against Darius is to rebel against the creator of the heavens.
Exactly. And then we get to Pillar 2, which is the earthly sovereign. Having established that God put him there, Darius does not hold back.
The text reads, I am Darius, great king, king of kings, king of many provinces of this great earth.
It is a relentless, driving drumbeat of expansive titles.
He claims absolute terrestrial dominance, validating his earthly rule as the direct, unstoppable execution of the divine will.
He uses the Latin translation equivalent of Rex Magnetari, king of this great earth.
So he is claiming universal total administration. Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Okay.
Because here is where I struggle with the underlying logic. I see the propaganda value, sure. But if I am a king, and my primary goal is to maintain control over millions of people, over disparate provinces, over tax collectors and potential rebels,
Yeah.
shouldn't I carve this claim of universal rule in the center of a major city? Why carve a proclamation of universal earthly administration in a mountain bottleneck where absolutely no one lives?
You have hit on the ultimate geopolitical paradox of the mountain decrees.
Right, universal administration on one side and total desolation on the other.
It seems completely contradictory.
The site is entirely devoid of human habitation. The antiquarian journals we're looking at literally describe the Fosses Alvanenses as a savage place haunted only by wild beasts and birds of prey.
Just vultures and rocks.
Yeah. So he goes through all this trouble, risks the lives of his stonemasons, claims to be the king of the great earth, and he's bragging about it to a bunch of vultures. It seems like a massive waste of his marketing budget.
It seems that way if we only view it through the lens of human biological time.
Okay, what do you mean?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to resolve that paradox, we have to look at what the scholars refer to as the architecture of eternity. You have to stop thinking about time on a human scale like days, months, political terms, and start thinking about time on a geological scale.
Geological time. We are talking in thousands of years.
Yes, the placement in terrifying, isolated, non-human environments was a deliberate ideological choice. The physical medium, an immovable, indestructible granite mountain, perfectly mirrors the textual message of an eternal, unshakable divine right.
Ah, so the rock itself is the message.
Exactly. Darius was not speaking to the passing merchant. He wasn't even really speaking to a rebel leader. He was carving an eternal record into the very bones of the earth.
Wow.
It is a decree meant for the audience of the divine and for future generations millennia later. He recognized that human spaces, cities, roads, plazas are inherently temporary. Cities burn.
Plazas are conquered.
Yeah.
Roads are rerouted.
Right. If you put it in a city, the next king who conquers that city just chisels his own name over yours. We see that all over ancient Egypt. Kings erasing their predecessors.
Oh, definitely. Plastering over the old names.
Precisely. By removing his decree from the daily human sphere, Darius removed it from human corruption, human debate, and human destruction. He anchored his legitimacy in the permanent geology of the planet.
It is incredibly profound. He is essentially saying, my rule is as permanent and undeniable as this granite mountain. The cities will turn to dust, but this rock will remain.
Exactly.
But practically speaking, I have to push back again.
Go for it.
Darius couldn't only speak to the gods, the vultures, and us sitting here 2.5 millennia later. He had an actual massive, sprawling human empire to run right then and there.
Very true.
If the mountain was for eternity, how did he structure power for the living? How did he control the diplomats, the generals, the tax collectors, and the vassals who ran the day-to-day operations of the Achaemenid machine?
That brings us to the second massive phase of this deep dive. Because Darius was a pragmatist as much as an ideologue.
Okay.
He understood that you cannot rule a global administrative empire solely from a hidden mountain gorge. You need spaces of active administration. You need a physical center of gravity.
So we are transitioning our focus from the colossal scale of the mountain to the monumental scale of the city.
Yes.
The historical records present this brilliant matrix called the 3 scales of power. First, you have the mountain, which is colossal and is designed to dominate the natural landscape. Next, you have the palace, which is monumental and is designed to dominate the human body.
And finally, you have the wax, which is intimate.
Right. We are going to move right into the middle scale. We are leaving the jaws of Alvand and traveling to the crown jewel of the empire, the palace complex of Persepolis.
And the shift from the cliffs of Behistun and Alvand to the terraces of Persepolis is a shift in both medium and audience.
How so?
We move from a carved limestone cliff aimed at eternity to a sprawling, multi-terraced architectural complex aimed squarely at the living. The visiting diplomats, the conquered vassals bringing tribute, and the elite royal court.
And the core message shifts, right? It goes from eternal cosmic mandate to immense wealth and crushing centralized bureaucracy.
Very much so.
The architectural records we have of Persepolis break down how the royal court was structured specifically, deliberately, to dwarf the individual. They engineered this ego-crushing experience in 3 distinct architectural steps.
The blueprints from the antiquarian journals are amazing for this.
Let's walk through the physical floor plan of Persepolis, starting from the very moment a visitor arrives.
The first step in this psychological conditioning is the approach. When visiting dignitaries, perhaps leaders of a newly conquered province, arrived at Persepolis, they didn't just walk through a grand front door.
Right.
They were met with massive, staggered, double-reversed staircases.
The grand stairways at Persepolis are fascinating from a purely physiological perspective. The steps are famously shallow, only a few inches high, but they are incredibly wide and deep.
You physically cannot jog up them.
No, you can't take them 2 at a time. The architecture forces a slow, deliberate, almost hypnotic procession-like ascent. You have to lift carefully and essentially march to the rhythmic pace that the building dictates.
It's physiological control. The architecture strips you of your natural individual gait. It dictates your physical movement before you even cross the threshold of a single room.
It forces patience, submission, and a collective rhythm.
Exactly. And once you finally endure that slow, exhausting climb and reach the top terrace, you enter step 2 of the psychological assault, the canopy of columns.
The records describe forests of towering stone pillars. The Apadana, which is the great audience hall, wasn't just a large open room. It was a dense grid of colossal stone trunks soaring 60 feet into the air.
Holding up massive cedar beams brought all the way from Lebanon.
The spatial psychology here is critical. Those pillars are meant to strip the visitor of any lingering sense of personal significance.
Oh, completely.
When you stand as an individual inside a forest of towering columns, you feel the crushing, literal weight of the centralized empire suspended directly above your head.
You are made acutely, physically aware of the staggering wealth, the advanced engineering, and the sheer immovable mass of the state.
I keep picturing walking into a modern corporate mega skyscraper, you know, that specific feeling?
Oh, yeah. The towering glass lobbies.
Yes. You walk through the heavy revolving glass doors, and you enter a lobby where the ceiling is 60 feet high, clad entirely in imported marble. Your footsteps echo. There are security turnstiles, long cavernous hallways, bank after bank of elevators.
It's designed to overwhelm you.
You feel tiny. You feel like a replaceable cog in a massive machine. Is Persepolis basically the ancient world's most aggressive corporate waiting room? It feels like the entire palace is acting as a giant architectural bouncer.
That is a highly accurate analogy, honestly. While the mountain monuments were designed to dominate the natural landscape, Persepolis was designed to dominate the human body and the human ego.
An architectural bouncer, I love that.
It really is. It's sorting, intimidating, and controlling the flow of humanity. Which brings us to the third step of the palace's design, the labyrinth.
When you look at the floor plans, it isn't an open concept palace. It's a strictly controlled architectural flow.
Very tight bottlenecks.
There are restricted corridors, staggered doorways, antechambers, and inner sanctums. The architecture dictated exactly who could access the physical presence of the king and at what specific time.
You don't just wander in and ask for an audience.
No. You are filtered, delayed, and processed through a crushing weight of centralized bureaucracy.
It visually and physically proved the gravity of the empire. At Behistun, you feel insignificant compared to the geological age of the mountain. At Persepolis, you feel insignificant compared to the bureaucratic and material weight of the state.
The palace is, at its core, a machine for manufacturing awe and compliance.
Absolutely. By the time a foreign diplomat actually reached the throne room, they had been physically exhausted by the stairs, psychologically shrunk by the columns, and bureaucratically humbled by the labyrinth.
They were primed to agree to whatever terms Darius dictated.
They really were.
So, the king has conquered the impassable mountains, and he has built a palace complex that literally crushes the egos of anyone who visits. It is a spectacular 1-2 punch of propaganda.
It is, but...
But there is a glaring logistical hole here.
Yes, there is.
What about the local bureaucrat out in Egypt? What about a military commander stationed on the furthest edges of India, or a tax collector in Thrace?
Most of the empire will never see these things.
Exactly. Most of the empire will never travel to the jaws of Alvand, and they will never climb the stairs of Persepolis. How does the king project that exact same crushing, undeniable power when you are thousands of miles away from both the mountain cliff and the palace columns?
That question brings us to the true genius of the Achaemenid administrative system. They understood that monumental architecture has geographic limits. You can't mail a palace.
You can't mail a mountain either.
Right, so they created what scholars call the Intimate Empire. They figured out how to compress the psychological weight of the mountain and the bureaucratic gravity of the palace into an object small enough to travel anywhere in the known world.
And that brings us to the third and final scale in our matrix, the wax. We are moving from the monumental to the intimately personal.
This is perhaps the most impressive scale.
I am completely obsessed with the historical artifact we are about to discuss. The antiquarian records introduce a specific object housed in the British Museum, often referred to as the Inscriptio Londinensis.
It is a crystalline cylinder seal. And when we talk about scale, the contrast is just absurd. This object is approximately 2 inches tall.
2 inches.
Yes.
We went from a granite mountain cliff to a sprawling stone city to something you can hold lightly between your thumb and forefinger. But the phrase that unifies all three of these scales is carved right into it. Ego sum Darius Rex.
I am King Darius.
This 2-inch cylinder seal was the ancient equivalent of a verified digital signature. It was used to press the physical impression of the king's absolute authority into wax or wet clay on administrative documents, royal decrees, and shipping manifests.
It allowed the king's presence, his literal stamp of approval, to travel to the furthest edges of the empire.
It is like taking a sprawling, massive, complex operating system and compressing it into a single tiny microchip.
Exactly.
You have all the power, all the data, all the authority, but it fits in your pocket. Let's look closely at the mechanics and the iconography of this 2-inch cylinder because it is densely packed with information. How do you even carve something that detailed into a crystalline stone in antiquity?
It requires extraordinary microscopic craftsmanship. The seal is carved from a hard stone like chalcedony or agate. Ancient artisans would have used bow drills and abrasive powders like emery or quartz dust to slowly, painstakingly grind the reverse image into the curved surface of the stone.
Wow. And what they carved into that tiny surface is a masterwork of miniature propaganda. It specifically depicts Zoroastrian cosmic warfare seamlessly blended with royal administration.
Let's break down the visuals.
Okay, first, dominating the scene, you have Darius Rex himself. The king is standing upright in a royal chariot. He is wearing the royal tiara, and he has a fully drawn bow.
He is projecting absolute martial control. He is not lounging on a throne. He is an active, violent warrior.
And flanking that violent scene on the edges of the impression is the date palm. A towering, beautifully structured date palm tree frames the combat.
This isn't just decorative scenery, though.
No, what does it mean?
The palm represents fruitful, structured, natural order. It signifies that the king's capacity for violence is precisely what brings agricultural and societal stability to the empire. His war creates the peace necessary for the crops to grow.
That is so layered. Then, hovering directly above the king's chariot, just like we saw in the massive mountain monument, is the fervor, or Ahura Mazda, the supreme deity, granting the divine mandate from the sky.
And here is the subtle psychological trick, the piece of visual manipulation we hinted at earlier.
Yeah.
If you look closely at the carving, Ahura Mazda shares the exact same face as the king.
Oh, wow. It is an incredibly deliberate and sophisticated visual choice. By giving the supreme god the face of the earthly king, Darius is blurring the lines between the divine architect of the universe and the human administrator of the state.
It is a visual assertion that they are of one mind, one purpose.
And what is that shared purpose? To understand that, you have to look at what the king's chariot is facing, what he is drawing his bow against. It is a rampant, terrifying lion.
A monstrous creature.
The 19th century German scholar, Georg Friedrich Grotefend, identified this lion not just as a wild animal, but as the embodiment of Ahriman, the destructive spirit. It is shown wounded in the forehead and the paw.
This is a vivid depiction of Zoroastrian dualism. The universe is a battleground between Ormuzd, the force of truth and order, and Ahriman, the force of lies and chaos.
And Darius is right in the middle of it.
Exactly. The servant of Ormuzd, which is Darius, must constantly battle that chaos. The empire, therefore, isn't just a political entity meant to collect taxes and build roads.
Right.
The empire is a cosmic necessity. The propaganda suggests that without Darius shooting his arrows into the lion of chaos, the entire world descends into darkness and destruction.
And wrapping all of this dense theological and political imagery is the administrative proof. The text, a trilingual script, runs vertically along the edge of the scene,
Written in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian.
translating to, "I am King Darius." But the brilliant part is that the text on the stone cylinder itself runs in reverse.
Well, it's a physical necessity of the medium.
Right, because this isn't just a tiny piece of art to display on a shelf. It is a functioning administrative tool. It has to be carved in reverse so that when a royal official rolls the cylinder across wet clay or hot wax, it stamps a positive, readable impression.
It leaves definitive, physical proof.
Proof of the king's personal authority on a document that is going to be unrolled by some minor official 1,000 miles away.
And the physical impression left in the clay is the king's proxy. Think about the life cycle of that document.
Okay, lay it out for me.
It is sealed in Persepolis, handed to a rider on the royal road, and it travels for weeks.
Weeks on horseback.
Right. When a provincial governor in Egypt breaks that wax seal, they are interacting with the structural authority of the empire just as surely as if they were standing at the foot of the staircases at Persepolis.
That's incredible.
The fear, the awe, the compliance, it is all transmitted through that tiny impression.
We've now explored the mountain, the palace, and the pocket-sized seal. On the surface, a sheer granite cliff haunted by vultures, a sprawling stone labyrinth filled with gigantic columns, and a tiny piece of wax have absolutely nothing in common.
They are entirely different materials.
They exist at entirely different scales. They serve seemingly different immediate functions. But architecturally, functionally, and philosophically, the antiquarian analysis argues they are exactly the same.
Because they all serve a singular, unified structural purpose. They are all load-bearing pillars of the Achaemenid reality.
So what does this all mean? How do we synthesize this? How do we pull all these antiquarian records, the Latin translations, the geographic routes, the floor plans of Persepolis, and the reverse-carved cylinder seals into one cohesive theory of power?
There's a final analysis in the historical records that makes a stunning visual and philosophical connection.
The records connect the architectural, physical reality of the palace directly to the mythological, theological reality of the cylinder seal.
Yes, let's paint that picture.
On one side, you have a physical stone column capital from Persepolis. We talked about those forests of pillars.
Right, the massive trunks.
At the very top of those pillars sits the capital, this massive, intricate, heavy piece of carved stone whose literal physical job is to hold up the crushing, immense weight of the palace roof.
It prevents the cedar beams and the stone from crashing down and crushing everyone inside.
And juxtaposed directly against that architectural reality, you have the image from the tiny cylinder seal, Darius in his chariot, physically holding back the chaotic lion, Ahriman.
The unification of those two images reveals the absolute core of Achaemenid propaganda.
Yeah.
Just as the intricate stone capitals physically hold up the heavy roof at Persepolis, preventing it from collapsing on the diplomats below.
Yeah.
Darius is depicted holding back the destructive chaos of Ahriman, preventing the cosmic sky from falling.
The core message, unified perfectly across all artifacts, all scales, and all materials, is simply this: without the king, the roof collapses.
This raises an important question, though, about the nature of systemic power.
What's that?
The genius of Achaemenid propaganda wasn't just bragging about military wins. Anyone can carve a list of conquered cities or dead enemies on a rock.
Sure, we see that all over the ancient world.
The true genius was convincing every single person in the empire, from the stonemason hanging from a rope on Mount Behistun, to the diplomat exhausted by the forced march up the stairs in Persepolis, to the bureaucrat receiving a wax seal in a border town in Egypt, that Darius was the only structural pillar keeping both cosmic and earthly chaos at bay.
The message is structurally identical across all three scales of physical existence. It is incredibly airtight. If the king falls, the god is angry, the palace literally crushes you, and the lions of chaos consume the natural world.
It's all connected.
Think about how brilliantly cohesive that is. Today, we talk constantly in the corporate and media world about brand consistency. You want your marketing campaigns to align. You want your app interface to match your website, which matches the aesthetic of your physical storefront.
You want a unified message.
Darius had brand consistency across geology, across monumental city architecture, and across personal, intimate correspondence.
He saturated the physical environment with the evidence of his structural necessity. You could not escape the evidence of his power because he had successfully made his power the infrastructure of reality itself.
Wow.
To question Darius was to question the existence of the ground you walked on and the sky above your head.
It is a masterclass in shaping human perception. We've gone on quite a journey today, digging through these antiquarian texts.
It's been wild.
We started by dangling off the terrifying, dizzying heights of the sheer cliffs at Behistun and fighting our way through the savage jaws of Mount Alvand, where the king bypassed humanity and spoke only to eternity.
Then we walked the ego-crushing, slow-marching stairs of Persepolis.
Where the state made sure you felt entirely insignificant under the weight of its towering stone columns. And finally, we saw how that immense crushing power was perfectly compressed into a tiny 2-inch crystal cylinder, pressed into wax to command absolute obedience across thousands of miles.
The physical scale dramatically changes, from a mountain to a city to a piece of wax.
But the core story of absolute, unquestionable authority remains exactly the same.
It serves as a powerful historical reminder that true power is not merely about physical force or military might. It's about how successfully an entity can architect the reality, the literal physical and psychological spaces in which its subjects live.
Which brings me back to where we started. We talked about how the landscape of human psychology is murky, but how some brilliant, ambitious people figure out how to engineer it anyway.
Oh, definitely.
Darius used granite mountains, stone labyrinths, and tiny wax seals to convince his entire world that he was the only thing preventing the sky from falling. Today, we don't look at cuneiform carved on cliffs. We look at algorithms, digital feeds, and screens of varying sizes.
Massive glowing billboards dominating our city squares.
Right, immersive digital environments. And we have the intensely intimate screen of the smartphone that you're probably holding in the palm of your hand right now.
The scales have changed. The technology has changed.
But the structural ambition of projecting omnipresent authority hasn't changed one bit. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Already.
What modern empires, whether they are tech monopolies, media conglomerates, or political institutions, are structuring your physical and digital architecture today? And how are they subtly, constantly trying to convince you that without them, your world collapses?
That's a lot to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this custom deep dive into the Achaemenid monuments and the terrifying scales of ancient power. Until our next exploration, stay curious and maybe look a little closer at the architecture around you.